Hello and welcome. Today's guest has been recognized as one of the world's leading cosmetic dermatologists for over 3 decades. He is a renowned podcast and radio host, a sought-after speaker, and a best-selling author who has written over 17 books, for which he has received the prestigious Quilly Award. In 2003, he was misdiagnosed with ALS and told he had 6 months to live. Alive and thriving, today he dedicates his life to helping others overcome adversity and live a fantastic life. Welcome to the show, Dr. Alan Lycka.
Well, thank you for having me, Allie. It's such a pleasure to be here. It's such a great time to be on the show and help others as well.
Well, thank you for being here. Now, you have lived quite a life. What was it like when you were told that you had 6 months to live?
You know, let me go back to that whole episode, because that whole episode is what really changed my life and made my life what it is. You know, I was walking with my dear wife at Disneyland, and she turned to me and she said, "What's wrong with you, hon?" You know, I was taken aback, Allie. For once in my life, I hadn't said anything wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't even thunk anything wrong. But she persisted. "What's wrong with you?" You know, I said, "Dear, I don't think there's anything wrong with me." And she said, "Well, dear, you got to listen to your foot." I said, "Dear, that's the funniest thing you've ever seen. What do you mean listen to your foot?" She said, "Well, listen to it." You know, my right foot had suddenly and mysteriously developed right foot drop. It was slapping on the pavement with each step I was taking. No, you know, I said, "I'm not sure." She said, "Did you have a stroke?" I said, "Dear, you're a doctor. I'm a doctor. If I had a stroke, I'd probably lying on the pavement muttering something unintelligible. But no, I don't think I've had a stroke." She said, "Well, you know, there's definitely something wrong." And I said, "I agree. Maybe it's hot out here. You know, it's 30 degrees and 30 degrees centigrade. And that's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And she said, "You know, well, I don't think that explains it. When you get back, you better get this checked out." Well, Alan, when your wife tells you to get something to get checked out and gives you that ultimatum, you have no choice but to get it checked
Right. Absolutely. So wow, you're at Disneyland and your wife notices that your right foot has dropped, and rightfully so, got concerned.
Well, it's supposed to be the happiest place on earth, but it certainly wasn't the happiest place on earth at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you listened to your wife.
Yeah.
And
after that, I went to see dozens of doctors,
yeah.
Probably hundreds of doctors by the time I got through. And, you know, they were befuddled by all this. They couldn't find anything wrong.
Yeah.
You know, they had done all these tests. They did brain scans. They did scans. They even did scans. They couldn't find anything wrong.
Now, walk me through what that was like, because as someone who has also experienced being a medical miracle and, you know, a guinea pig for 9 years, I know what my mental, emotional journey was, going through doctor after doctor after doctor and test after test. So walk us through.
Well, you know, it's the most frustrating thing, because, you know that they're looking for something, and you know that they're trying to find something, and they're trying to find something bad. You know, they're looking for a cancer, or they're looking for something like a neurological problem that just isn't readily available. And so they keep looking. And you know, doctors are like that. When they can't find something, they find another test that's going to find something. And they'll find another test that'll find something. And it's a frustrating thing. It must be very difficult for a doctor who's an internal medicine specialist, because they keep looking and looking and looking, and they're always looking for these bad things. And as a doctor, I had to put myself aside from this and say,
Yeah.
this is not good what they're doing, and maybe at the end of this they'll have an answer. So they finally sent me to a neurologist, and a neurologist is the brain guy. He's the
Right.
guy that has all the answers to all the brain problems.
Right.
So I went to see him, and I walked in and I said, hi. And he said, hi back. He said, you better be sitting down when I tell you this. I said, why? He said, because you have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Get your affairs in order.
Now, when he told you that, so you have the medical training as well. You're quite an esteemed, accomplished physician, and yet here you are. You've now experienced going through doctor after doctor after doctor, test after test after test. How are you balancing the emotions? How are you balancing the pressures, the fears, the anxiety? What's going through your head, both before he tells you that you have ALS and then at that moment?
Well, I don't think there's any balancing it at all. I mean, at that point in time, you are powerless. Even as a doctor, you're walking in, and this doctor that has all the pieces is giving you a diagnosis. And so I asked him, is there a way to prove this diagnosis? He said, of course, on autopsy.
And that, of course, is a no-go.
So I shoot back at him. I'm not going to die to prove you wrong. There's just no way I'm going to go through this. But Ellie, when you go through this, you go through the phases of death and dying. And I know you went through them as well, when you went through those tremendous 9 years, when you went through that terrible time in your life. And one of the first emotions you get is anger, really anger. You are so angry at the world, you could bite the head off nails. The whole world is angry. And the only good thing about anger is it drives you forward. You're not incapacitated. At least when you're angry, you're doing something. So you're angry, you're mad at everything, you're spitting, you're angry, and everything else. But that's a very primary emotion that you go through. Another basic emotion you go through is bargaining. Oh God, please don't let this happen. I will do anything if you don't let this happen. I'll go to church every Sunday. I'll say my prayers. That's another thing. You go through a stage of denial. And I'm sure you went through the stage of denial too, that you say, no, there's really nothing wrong. I'm really healthy. I can do anything. And so I'd work 12, I'd work 18 hours a day. I'd really drive myself through all this. But my right leg wasn't working right. And through all this, my right arm started not working right either. And it just wasn't able to hold the surgical instruments that I was able to. But Ellie, I was talented. So I learned how to do everything with my left hand. And my left hand became as good as my right hand. So I became a one-handed surgeon. I could do everything with my left hand. And so I was able to carry on. But then comes a very, very ugly state called depression. Were you ever depressed through the states that you went through?
I was only very, very briefly. For me, I held on to anger and I used that as fuel. And then instead of falling into depression, I went the other way, where I reverted to that petulant, determined child that was like, "No, you're not going to win. I'm not succumbing. I don't, la la la. I can't hear you. I'm not listening to you. You are not the boss of me." And so I kind of went into that mode and used that as a driver. But
These are all phases that people
yeah.
go through. And I think Elizabeth Kubler-Ross called these stages that people go through. But I don't think these are stages. I think you flip through these. Your brain goes into one and then goes into another and then goes into another. And they happen all going on at the same time.
Yeah.
But the worst one, the one that incapacitates you, is depression. And there's so many people that go through that depression stage where everything's black, where you can't sleep, you cannot eat, the world is black. People contemplate suicide in this, and because there's no way out of this depression. And I think I even considered that for a while. And I went to my wife and I said, "Dear, what should I do?" She said, "You're smart. You can figure it out," she said. I said, "Well, I saw hundreds of doctors. They couldn't figure it out." She said, "Well, I have faith in you. You can figure it out." Wow, that was a vote of confidence. Back then in 2003, something new was invented. You might have heard of that, Allie. It's called the internet. You ever hear of that?
Yes, yes. And so you decided that you were not going to accept the neurologist's diagnosis, and you set out to figure it out for yourself, to set yourself free
being
from
a
it.
doctor and being a dermatologist and being all these things, I had a lot of knowledge and a lot of friends. And so when I went to the internet back in 2003, you only could get on with dial-on connections. I don't know if you've had that pleasure, but that's when your phone goes on a cradle and it interacts with another computer. It goes ria, ria, ria for something like 15 minutes, and finally it communicates. And then you have to communicate by a language called DOS, because there was no memory in computers back then. We didn't have Dr. Google. We didn't have Dr. Yahoo. We didn't have all these things that help us now. But that was the way we used to interact with things and get things done. So I had friends that were nerds, and they were able to access the internet. And I've always said the internet is one of the greatest inventions of mankind. But it's like a library with some of the greatest books and the greatest resources, but it's filled with garbage cans. And you can't tell the garbage cans from the great resources that are there. And that's the difficulty we face with it. Well, I was able to find a doctor in Colorado Springs, Colorado, by the name of David Martz, who had a story very, very similar to mine. But he had gotten worse much more rapidly than I did. He literally was on his deathbed within a couple of weeks of his diagnosis. And doctors from around the world were coming up to say goodbye to him. He was a well-known hematologist. He was beloved. And people were coming up to say goodbye to him. And a doctor came up from Colorado, from Texas, to say goodbye. Dr. Harvey, and he looked at David and he said, "David, there's something wrong with this picture. You do not have ALS. You do not have this ugly disease, Lou Gehrig's disease." He said, "You have, I think, something called chronic Lyme's disease." He said, "What's that?" Because no one had ever heard of it back then. He said, "I think you've been bitten by a tick, and it's mimicking this disease called ALS. And I think if I start you on treatment, I can make you better." Well, he started on treatment, and just like Lazarus, he arose from the dead. Within 2 weeks, he was back to his normal self.
So when you heard about him and his story, mentally and emotionally, take us through that process.
I said, wow, this is amazing. I think there's an answer to my questions here. I think this person has some answers to it. So I immediately started calling all the hospitals in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Trying to find him, trying to connect with him?
Because, doctors can get in touch with any other doctor if they want to.
Yeah.
All they have to do is find out which hospital they work at,
Hmm.
introduce yourself as a doctor. They will get in touch with them. And they got in touch with David Martz for me. And I found out, I got in touch with him at the Methodist Hospital in Colorado Springs. And we talked for hours. And he said, you know, Dr. Lycka, I have started a clinic treating people with this disease. He said, I've treated over 2,000 people with this disease now. And he says, it's amazing, but this is much more common than people realize. So David said, can you come down to see me? And I said, I'd love to. When would you like me to come? He said, what about right now? I said, David, I'd love to, but it's our Thanksgiving in Canada. We have a different Thanksgiving than you do, Ellie, as
Yeah.
you know. And my wife had invited over 50 people for that weekend. So I said, I can't. He said, well, aren't there any planes in Canada?
Exactly. I mean, I would have been like, sorry, dear, I'm on the next plane.
Yeah. So I went to my wife and I apologized. I said, I won't be here for Thanksgiving. She said, where are you going? You always seem to be going away. And she said, well, I'm going to Colorado Springs to a person that claims he can help me. And she said, well, what are you waiting for? I'll pack your bags for you. I'll drive you to the airport.
Exactly.
So I got down to Colorado Springs. You know, I first went from Edmonton to Denver, a great flight, about 2.5 hours long. And then I got on a rinky-dink puddle jumper from Denver to Colorado Springs.
Now, walk me through the emotions, though, when you know now you have your ticket and now there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Well,
and
I
there's
think the best way to describe the emotions was on that flight from Denver to Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
That plane was, you see, at the end of the day, the air comes off the desert and it causes eddies. So all of a sudden, the air will cause a plane to drop 100 feet. It'll climb 100 feet. Yeah. It'll drop 100 feet. So you're like a yo-yo. You're like a cork in a tidal wave. You're like on a wild mouse ride. So the emotions are all over the place. You're up and you're down and you're around and you're thrown about in this turbulent time. That's just insane. It just is crazy. And you crawl off that plane green. And when I did, there was David on the tarmac to meet me. He literally was there. You see, this was before you had imposed all those high restrictions preventing this. And so he was there to meet me. And I crawled off and he said, you're not looking so good, Dr. Lycka. And I said, I'm not feeling so good. He says, it's probably analogous to what you've been going through all these years. And he said, I think we need to go and talk. And Ellie, we talked. And at the end of it, he said some miraculous words. He said, I think history is repeating itself. I think you are going through what I went through. And he said, I think I can start you on treatment. And I think you can become better just like it. And that's how I was able to succeed and maintain my practice as a top cosmetic surgeon for over 16 years. Wow. And I was able to win the Consumer's Choice Award for each of those years just because of blind determination.
That's outstanding. And so how amazing that you were able to connect with this doctor. And obviously here we are many, many years later, and you now have pivoted and you're helping people to live fantastic lives. You've taken everything from your journey and are now using it to help people.
Well, so the story goes on from there, you know, after.
Yes, but I want to know, what did you learn from all of these experiences? So for the
experience along the way is, you know, when you go through something so devastating like this, just like you did, you decide what life you're going to live. You decide what you're going to do to really make life different. You know, when you go through devastating things like this, you really check yourself and you say, you know, did I really have a great life? Did I really live? Did I love? Did I really matter? And one of the things I decided to do was to give back to society. And a thing I decided to do was to sponsor an event called the Women of Distinction event for the YWCA. And in that, we honored women for the roles that they did. You know, even now in this day and age, as you know, Ellie, people in the women category are still not honored the way they should. They still do not get the kudos they did. So I decided to sponsor this gala event. And a lady by the name of Harriet Tinka applied for an award called a Turning Point Award.
Yes, and you wrote a book with her that is
Harriet's story is just like mine, but so different. She applied for the award because she was a world-class model. And she was walking the cat ropes of New York and decided she didn't like it anymore. So she went to become an accountant, took an accounting degree at the University of Calgary. And what happened is she was befriended by an ugly, mean person who ended up kidnapping her, stabbing her, and leaving her for dead. So she applied for this award so that she could talk to me and said, Dr. Lycka, we need to write a book on our adventures. And we wrote this book called The Secrets of Living a Fantastic Life, which took a couple of years to write. But it really is about people overcoming adversity. It's really about people living the lives that they need to do. It's about people getting outside of their shells and doing the things that they need to do with their lives. And it really is things people can do with their life. You know, everybody.
Well, let's dive into that, because this show is all about giving people actionable tools and strategies that they can use to live life on their own terms and to truly become the architect of a life that they love, a life that is free by design, a life where they are shedding the chains of their past and living with intentionality and making the decisions to live that life that they love. So let's talk about some of those actionable tools.
Sure. Well, let's talk about those, and I'll tell you what those actionable pearls that we talk about in our book. You know, we talk about golden pearls. You know, golden pearls are really amazing things. They actually exist in nature, and they exist in the South Pacific. And the way a pearl is formed is a little grain of sand gets inside of an oyster, and it causes the oyster not to be destroyed by it, but to wall it off and make this golden pearl. Now, these golden pearls are so rare. A single solitary golden pearl cost upwards of $10,000. Now, the golden pearls that are found inside of you are even more invaluable. They are right inside of you, and everybody just needs to look at them and realize what they are. And in our chapters of our book, we refer to 13 golden pearls, 13 little golden pearls everybody should look at.
So let's talk about some of those specifically. Let us in on some of these golden pearls that lie within each of us that we can use.
I'm going to read you the story of one of those golden pearls right now. The first golden pearl we refer to is love. And love, in each of these chapters, we have a story that brings it off. And the first story I'm going to tell you is called The Shoebox. There once was a little girl who was extremely happy. She was angelic with red curly hair. She was always singing and playing. She never walked. She skipped everywhere she went. The world was her oyster. From sunup to sundown, everyone who saw her had a smile on their face. One day, her father punished her for wasting a roll of gold wrapping paper. You see, money was tight, and he became infuriated when it appeared the child had wrapped an empty shoebox. Nevertheless, on Christmas Day, the little girl brought the gift to her father and said, "This is here for you, Daddy." The man became even more infuriated when he opened it up and found that the box was empty. Don't you know that when you give someone a present, you're supposed to put something inside? Oh, Daddy, you're so silly, he said. This is not empty at all. I blew kisses into the shoebox. They're all in it for you, Daddy. While the father was crushed, he put his arms around his little girl and he begged for forgiveness. Well, only a short time later, a tragic car accident took the life of the little girl. Her father kept the gold wrapped shoebox by his bed for many years, and whenever he became discouraged, he would take out an imaginary kiss and remember the love of the child who had put it in there. And when he closed his eyes, he could see his little girl. He could even hear her giggle and feel her on his lap. He actually felt her kisses, and in his mind, he felt she was still there with him. Many years later, the man died of a broken heart. He went to heaven, and St. Peter met him at the pearly gates. St. Peter said, "To enter, you must give me something very valuable. I can't let you in without it." The old man gave St. Peter the most important thing he owned, the empty shoebox. St. Peter smiled and said, "Enter, my friend. You have given me the gift of everlasting love, the most valuable gift of all." And inside, he was reunited with his precious daughter. She smiled at him and gave him a real kiss. "I missed you," said the old man. "Why, Daddy?" she asked the little girl. "I never left you. When I died, God made me into an angel. When you opened the shoebox to get a kiss, I gave you one. I giggled in your ear, and I sat on your lap. I was always there with you. I will always be your little girl." Author unknown.
Wow. So, so one of the golden pearls is love. Really quickly, run us through the 13 golden pearls. So we have love. What are the other 12?
Yeah, so let's go through them. The number one is love. Second one is inspiration. Third one is victory. Fourth one is vulnerability. Fifth one is intention or purpose. Sixth one is non-negotiables. Seventh one is forgiveness. Eighth one, attitude. Ninth one is thankfulness. 10th one is tenacity. 11th one is laughter. 12th is enthusiasm. And 13th is empowerment.
Wow, those are definitely golden pearls. All 13 of those are really important to creating a life that you love or to living a fantastic life. So you have overcome a lot in your journey, and you have these 13 golden pearls. Besides the golden pearls, what would you say has been the single most powerful resource, tool, or strategy that you personally have used to move from this misdiagnosis of ALS into this full, aligned, fantastic life that you love?
Well, I think it's a statement that was made by a sophist over 2,000 years ago. His name was Epictetus. And he said, "It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens." And I think that single solitary statement drives me through every day. And I think that's what basically can take anybody from where they're at to where they're going to be. Just to embrace that philosophy. Remember, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens.
That's so true. Perspective, meaning, right? Change your story, change your life. Using empowering language, assigning empowering meanings to the events and circumstances that you are experiencing, because obviously you don't have control over the external. You don't have control over the events and circumstances that happen, but you do absolutely have control over the perspective you hold about that, or the meaning you give to it. And to your point, Dr. Lycka, you have control with what you do with what happens to you. To what you have control over the actions that you take. So, what is the most powerful tool that you have used for your mindset to be able to then control what you do with what happens to you?
I think it best is said by a little story that, again, is in one of my chapters. See, there was a carpenter by the name of Fred, and he was tired after working for one company all the days of his life. He was tired, so he went to his boss and said, "Boss, I'm done. I can't do this anymore." The boss was taken aback because Fred had helped him build every house in the company that he'd built. He said, Fred, could you please do one more thing before you leave?" Well, Fred said, "Of course, I've loved it here. This is the only job I've ever had, and I'd love to help you with whatever you'd like." And the boss said, "Just build me one more house. You're the only person that can do it. You're my master carpenter." Fred begrudgingly said yes, but his heart was not into it. And he dragged his ass to work and basically got the job done. But at the end of it, a miracle happened. The house passed inspection. So he went back to the boss and said, "Boss, I'm done. Here's the keys to that last house." The boss said, "Hold it, Fred. We're going to have a big party." So he gathered everybody in the office. They popped the champagne, they had the caviar, and they had a great party. And at the end of it, the boss said, "Gather around, everybody. I have something to say. Everybody, this is Fred's last day. I'm going to be very sad, but he's going to be very happy because he's retiring. And Fred, I've got a gift for you. Here's the keys to the last house you ever built. Enjoy it with all the enthusiasm you've given me all the years of your life."
Wow. Wow. What a great story. Now, you mentor a lot of people, you help so many people, but what is one piece of advice that you wish somebody would have shared with you earlier in your journey, and how would that piece of advice have affected the rest of your journey? How would that piece of advice have affected what you would have done with events and circumstances?
I could talk to my younger self and just tell myself some of the things I've learned along the way. I'd say, younger self, enjoy the journey along the way. Don't be as driven to get to the destination. The journey along the way helps to prepare you for the destination. Enjoy some of the things you're doing. Don't just try to get it done. Those are some of the things I think many people are always trying to do, is build their company. They're trying to do their thing today and trying to look over the things that are really, really important. And I think they need to really decide that those things are really the formative things. Those are the things that will allow you to enjoy the things that are there today. Enjoyment really comes in the moment. It comes in the perspective. When I get up in the morning now, I look at my schedule and I say, "Oh my goodness, look at who I'm talking to today. Look at the amazing people I have the pleasure of sharing some time with." When I looked at my schedule today, Ali, I said, "Look at this wonderful thing we're going to be doing. We're going to be put together a podcast that hopefully can influence others along the way, and they can really decide how they can help there this year and moving on to the next."
Yes, you have your you have an incredible podcast, and we met because we both received a Quilly Award, and I had the honor of being on your podcast, and here we are on this show. And I have so much respect for your journey and so much respect for how you show up in the world and how you have really made it your mission and your purpose to help people live a fantastic life. And I love that your answer was basically play more, have more fun along the way. We so often focus on the outcome, or we focus on the destination and forget about the journey. So I think that's a really, really powerful reminder to everyone is play more, laugh more, enjoy the journey. To your point about being grateful every single day for, even the smallest of things, like these incredible conversations that we're able to have not only with each other, but with other guests and friends and our clients and people that we mentor. So what would you say to them as you're having them navigate getting off the success train, where shifting the focus from I need to achieve, I need to be successful by accomplishing all of these things or achieving all of these things? What would you say to them to help them shift their focus from the external, from those external achievements and accomplishments, help them silence that inner critic or deal with limiting beliefs or limiting paradigms so that they can enjoy the journey? What would you say to them?
Well, it's a simple journey, actually. I think people should read more. I think they should look at things that way. Start the year with picking up 3 books and read them. Start the journey with picking up 3 things that you would like to do. Start the year with doing some things that you wouldn't regularly do. Little baby steps are really what takes it. You start the year with making a commitment with spending 10 minutes of being silent and just listening to your inner self. Those are things that really help to get you off that success-driven track. And success is really not that difficult when you realize that all you have to do is 2 or 3 little things each day to make it happen. And that really is what determines a lot of our successes along the way. 2 or 3 little baby steps along the way. So you don't have to be overly consumed by it. You just have to let it happen more.
Yeah, it's the old adage, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So I love that. I love one step at a time, progress over perfection, because there's no such thing. Just doing 2 or 3 smaller things every day to move the needle so that you're continually making progress. And while you're moving the needle, to really enjoying the journey, to being present in that journey. Now, self-care is critical. You know this throughout your own, you know it as a physician, you know it throughout your own journey, and you know it when you are helping people to really create that fantastic life, that joyful life, the life that they love. So what is your self-care practice, and how do you ensure that it remains a priority?
I think the easiest way to start a self-care practice, and one of the things I do, is I concentrate on being grateful. I concentrate on being on the gratitude that I have. I wasn't supposed to be here in 2003. And so it's easy for me to look at things and look at things and how I do things and say, wow, no matter what, I'm very grateful for all this extra time that I've been given and this time to help others to move forward and help them with their perspective of things. And that's where I think that gratefulness is a very important part of people's planning and moving forward with that. Without that gratefulness, I don't think there's really a good perspective for people to move forward with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Gratitude, I think, for me is the single most important thing, to be grateful for every breath that you take, for every moment that you have, and for all of the experiences, the people that you meet, the experiences that you get to have. So, as we start to wrap up, Dr. Lycka, if you had to sum up your life, your journey, in a few sentences, what would that be?
I think the one sentence is again the statement of Epictetus, where he stated, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. Remember, if you're given lemons, you could make lemonade. You don't have to concentrate on the fact that you've been given lemons. Remember that it's the little baby steps you take to make things happen. There will be failures along the way. In fact, many of the things I became greatest at were some of my biggest failures. I had to apply to get into dermatology schools many times in order to be successful at it. I remember once my mother-in-law saying, when is he going to give up this foolish goal that he has? But we proceeded, and I was able to get a great internship, a great residency. I was able to be successful at that. When I found that my right arm wasn't working right, or my right leg wasn't working right, I was able to overcome that. And even without that, I'm still grateful that I have a great left arm, a great left leg, a great brain that helps me to overcome my obstacles in my given day. And it really is not a challenge, but a joy to succeed forward each and every day.
And what would you like to be remembered for, with all the things that you've done and all the things you continue to do and all of the accolades that you have and all of the contributions that you have already made in this world? What would you say is your legacy?
I think my legacy is helping others, doing the greatest that they can do with their lives, that helping others move forward with their lives. That would be the greatest legacy I have. As I said, some of my greatest achievements are the children and grandchildren I have. So those are some of my greatest achievements. And I think some of the people I've helped along the way and mentored and taught along the way are some of the greatest achievements I've had. So I look forward to helping people in their regular day and helping them in any way I can. If people would like a professional speaker on their stage, I would love to help them either in presence or virtually. People would love me to be on their podcast. I'd love to help them with things. So I think those are the ways I can help in moving this world forward and helping this world get out of the funk it's in.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned your children and your grandchildren and them being such a critical part of your legacy. Let's fast forward to you're at the end of your life. You have moments left to live. What is the message that you are leaving, not only the world, but your children and your grandchildren?
Well, I think the message is one I've already stated. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. And that is the message I'd like everybody to take forward and move with that. That was the message they should embody in themselves.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time and for sharing your story with us and your message and your mission. It is certainly a powerful one. I know my top takeaways from this incredible conversation that we've had are really to enjoy the journey, to have more fun, to play more, to live in gratitude, to do a couple of things every day to move the needle, and to embrace that no matter what happens to you, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. And you are in control of creating a fabulous life. You are in control of creating a life that is free by design, and you are not what's happened to you. You are not your events and circumstances. You are a miracle. And Dr. Lycka, you are a miracle. So, how can people connect with you to learn more about your work or to engage you? How can people find you?
The best way is to go to my website, Dr. Allen, Lycka.com. And if they would like a free copy of my book, they can get a digital copy at 1313 GP Golden Pearls Now.ca. 13gpnow.ca. Enjoy.
Amazing. Thank you so much for spending this time. May you continue to live a legendary life. May you continue to live a fantastic life. And may you continue to live a life that is free by design.
Thank you
Until
for
next
having me.
time.
It was my
Until,
pleasure to be here.
thank you so much. Until next time.